there are new time-saving shortcuts being added to Visual Studio with each update. In this video, I want to highlight 10 of those shortcuts that are in Visual Studio 2019 as of version 16.10.3. Now, some of these have been added very recently, while others probably slipped in a couple earlier versions, but they go under the radar so often. I want to make sure we point these out and highlight when you can really save some time with these new features. Now, if this is your first video of mine, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. One of the ways I do that is by showing you how to use the free tools you have available to you in a better way, in a more efficient way. If that's something that interests you, definitely subscribe to this channel. Also check out IAmTimCorey.com, where I have a number of start to finish full courses on learning C# on your own. Okay, now this video will have source code, so I will include a link in the description to get that source code if you would like. But really, this is all about those time-saving shortcuts. So the source code isn't as important as the actual shortcuts themselves. All right, let's look at Visual Studio, and we're gonna start with a new project. So let's do a new console application just to get something going. So we'll say new console application .NET Core. We'll call this shortcut demo, and we'll say shortcut demo app. Now we're actually gonna add another project type to this in a little bit, but for now, this gets us started. So the first one I wanna show off once this gets started is, let's say we're gonna create a new class. Now I'll do it right in the same file. We could create a separate file, but I want to show you to create in this same file. So the first shortcut that's been added recently is if I say public class, let's call this demo class. Now normally I would put curly braces and then hit enter and make sure those curly braces are in the right lines and so on. But there's now a thing called the smart line break, which if you hit shift enter, it puts those curly braces in and it puts your cursor in the right spot. So I didn't type a curly brace, I just hit shift enter. This works with methods as well. So public void test method, and I hit shift enter and it puts the curly braces in. If I say if 1 is greater than 0, and I put shift enter, it puts the curly braces in. Anywhere you're gonna get curly braces, if you hit shift enter at the end of the line, it's going to add those curly braces for you and move your cursor into the right spot. This is really helpful. It's also one of those things that you might miss if you didn't explicitly notice it in one of the updates. Now, this is a bonus one, but I created this class in the same file as the program class. We don't want to keep it there. So if you hit Control dot while highlighting demo, you can bring up your quick actions refactoring menu. And one of those things is that we can first extract an interface or a base class, which is kind of cool, but we can move this to demo.cs, click that, and it will move that class out, create its own file, and put our class in that file. So that's the first tip or shortcut that has been added to Visual Studio. And that's pretty recently. It's in the 16.10 range somewhere. So the next one, we're going to have to turn on a setting. So we're going to go to Tools, Options, and we're going to go down here to Text Editor, C#, and then inside here we want to look for Advanced. And inside there, we're going to say Add Missing Using Directives on Paste. So this right here. Add missing using directives on paste. So let's check that box and hit OK. Now, let's just say in my console application, I created a list of string called names equals new list of string, right? And I go, oh, wait, I don't have the using for that. We select the red squiggly, we hit Control dot, and it says, hey, you want to add the using system.collections.generic. Well, yes, we do. Cool. But if I were to copy this, and then go over to demo.cs and come down here into my test method. Notice there is no using statements at the top of this. Line 1 is the namespace. But if I hit paste right here, notice it added using system.collections.generic. But I pasted in something that it knew what the usings were. So when you're copying and pasting code from one spot to another, it goes, hey, wait a minute, I know which using statements you need. Let me go ahead and take care of those for you. And it puts them in automatically. A little bit of magic there to make your life a little easier. Now, if it doesn't know what using statement to add, of course, that would be a problem. But if it knows the using statement and it's pretty intelligent about which using statements you're going to want, it's going to add up for you automatically. So that's number 2, is that adding missing using directives when you paste code. Now, the next one is another setting we have to change. So tool options. And in this same text editor C# advanced, we're going to scroll down and look for the show inheritance margin. Okay, and that's, I believe, down at the very bottom. Yes, it is. All right, now this is marked as experimental, but we want to show inheritance margin. Now, I'm going to show you what this does. This is a pretty cool feature. So let's create some inheritance here. I've got this demo class. Let's create a new class. We're going to call it better demo. And we'll make it public. And we're going to inherit from demo. Okay? So it inherits from demo. And we don't even have to put a method here. That's not the point. Now let's create another class. And we're going to say different demo. And make it public as well. And we're going to say inherit from demo as well. Okay? So now, because we have added that checkbox, all right, let's save all those. We've added that checkbox. Let's zoom in on the left margin. And you'll notice this little thing right here. And what this has is a little blue box with arrows up and down in it, and it has an up white arrow. Okay? That's saying that this has a parent. So if we were to zoom out and we were to click on this, it says demo. And we say, well, what does that mean, demo? Well, you click on that, it's going to take you right to the class that it inherited from. This is the parent class for our different demo. Now, you'll notice over here that demo has that same icon, only the white arrow is pointing down, if you can see that. And if we click on that, we actually have 2 different items. And it's saying, here's the 2 classes that inherit from demo. Better demo and different demo. Which one do you want to go to? Let's go to better demo. Click on it, and it takes you right to that class. So a little feature, but at the same time, it's showing you the inheritance structure. Now let's use the same margin as our breakpoints. So if we were to have a breakpoint in here like so, it's the same margin as the breakpoints, which you may say, well, wait a minute, then I can't put a breakpoint at that spot. You're correct, but you couldn't anyways, because this is on the class definition itself. It's not on anything actionable. So we wouldn't put a breakpoint there anyway. Therefore, we can reuse the same gutter and not take up more space in our IDE. So that's our third new shortcut, and that is that we can see the inheritance margin and take us to the different spots where we have that inheritance relationship. Yes, we can do this with the F12 and Shift F12 and Control F12, but this allows us to very quickly navigate around. And the part that I like the best is the parent view, because you can see all the places this is inherited. I like that a lot. Okay, so that's number 3. For this next one, we need to add some references we don't need. Now, we're not talking about the using references up here, which these are just saying, hey, we're going to refer to something we already have installed. These are just shortcuts, remember. We're talking the actual references. So in dependencies, let's just say I add, let's add a NuGet package, a few NuGet packages, ones we don't need. Let's add JSON, newtonsoft.json. We're going to say okay to that. And let's add another one. Let's add AutoMapper. Okay. Now, I'm not going to use these. I'm just adding them to my project. Now, this is going to create a bit of a bloat on my application. It's going to add DLLs that I don't actually need. So if I right-click on my project, I now have an option called Remove Unused References. If I click that, it's going to say, hey, you know what? You have two projects or two packages, AutoMapper and Newtonsoft, that you are not using. Do you want me to remove those? This is really helpful in projects that have grown over time. What happens is they grow and they change and they morph, but you're never really sure, are we using that somewhere? Are we still using that? And we went through the upgrade from .NET Framework to .NET Core, and maybe we don't need those things anymore, but we're not sure. We don't want to touch it, because if we touch it, it might break. So this way, it's going to scan your code, see what's not being used, and it's going to say, hey, you know what? We can remove those things for you. Do you want to do that? In this case, well, sure I do. We could say keep if you wanted to. Now notice this says packages. It's also going to look at other types of references as well, including class library references or references to DLLs and other ways we're referencing code that we're bringing into our application. So we hit apply. This cannot be undone. You sure want to do it? Yes, we do. Now, if we go back to our manage NuGet packages, we look at the installed packages, there are none. They're gone. Okay, so that is my fourth really big, helpful shortcut, and that is to remove the unused references. Number 5 really takes its own video, or is going to need its own video to explain fully. I'm going to do that in the near future, but I'm going to talk briefly about EditorConfig. EditorConfig is a way to enforce a style guide and some other rules around your specific project or solution. And it's a thing you can pass around, put in source control, and say, for this solution and all the projects underneath, these are the things I want to have applied. I want this. I want this type of spacing. I want this type of error handling. I want this type of, these things are warnings. These things are errors. The problem was that up until now, EditorConfig was a blank JSON file where you could add in the rules that you knew about and that you want applied. But that's not great for self-discovery. That's not great for understanding what you could do. It's great for once you know what to do, you can easily do it. The problem is it's a newer technology and we're not necessarily sure how to use it, so it gets underutilized. Well, now I can right click and I can do that at the project level, or I can say add EditorConfig, or I can go at the solution level and say add EditorConfig. Let's add at the solution level. Notice it's adding the solution items. And now we have this nice user interface that shows us exactly what the options are by default and allows us to change them. So let's look at a few of these. So for example, use tabs. We're not using tabs, we're using spaces. Now, there's a little bit of confusion about tabs versus spaces. I use my tab key. It's called a smart tab. And what happens is it puts the amount of spaces in that I call one tab. By default, that is 4 spaces. Let's just say that I want to change that tab size to 2 and the indentation size to 2 as well. Tab versus indentation, it's saying, hey, do you want 1 tab? Which I do. I want 1 tab per indentation, not have to hit it twice. So we're going to say the tab size is 2 and the indentation size is 2 as well. That means 2 spaces. Normally it's 4. So if you go back here to, let's go to demo, notice that this public class demo right here, right? Let's count the number of spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 spaces right there. Now, if I were to hit tab, notice that it's actually spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the other way as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's what my tabs have been doing by default. With the editor config, I can say make that 2 instead, and it's going to apply for this project. The cool thing is it will override your Visual Studio settings for your defaults, which means that you can say for your team, hey, we're going to do these settings. But that doesn't mean you have to all go in and change your Visual Studio settings. You just need to have this editor config file in your project. It also means you can work on different teams that have different standards, and this will apply the correct standard for the correct team without you having to think about it. There's a lot of options in here. Notice we can scroll down and read through all the different options. For example, insert space after comma. Yes, I love that. Definitely do that. But then this is just the formatting tab. Notice there's also a code style tab where you can get into a lot more code style. For example, do you want using statements, simple using statements? Yes or no. A simple using statement is the one where it's the newer style where you just say using and there's a semicolon at the end. It does not create the curly braces so that you can have less indentations. And notice prefer simple using statements is yes, make that a suggestion. So that when you have a using statement that has curly braces, it's going to say, hey, do you want to make that a simple using statement? Or I can say, you know what? No, make that an error. And then it's going to stop the application from compiling until you fix that, which that's a little extreme, okay? But that's a possibility. So a suggestion is going to be here in our error list. These are suggestions. Notice the 5 messages, okay? Now I have messages in here right now, IDE 0040, accessibility modifier required. That's saying that I don't have the public or private on class program, okay? So these are things we're already used to using, but now we can add our own in here and say, these are the things I want to require. Make sure you do an is null check. Make sure that you have or prefer an object initializer. There's a lot of stuff in here. We're not going to go into all of it in this video. It's way too deep for that, but note that it's all here and it now has a GUI. We can actually click on these things, read them over, see what they say. If we have to, we can look up what an expression body for constructor means and then go, yeah, I want that, or no, I never want that. And these are defaults right now. We can make any changes we want. There's also analyzers. This is where, notice all of our ID codes, and there's a lot of them. You can make changes to how your application deals with all these different ID codes. So do not declare event fields as virtual. That's a suggestion right now. You can say, no, you know what? That should be a warning. All right. Do not expose generic lists. That's a warning right now. We can say, no, let's disable that. And you can make these tweaks and changes as fits your environment. But the nice thing is they're all listed here. You can go make your own changes. You don't have to go in the editor config and do it manually in JSON. Now, I have applied a little bit of a change, just these tab sizes. Now notice that didn't do anything here. But if I go better demo and I were to say hit enter, notice it actually hit enter and put it on the same line. And I'm like, well, that's not right because it should be, it's tabbed in, right? Well, actually it's on the same line because that's the indent level for the new spacing. But this isn't right because I now have 4 spaces here, but it's saying that's actually 2 tabs, not 1, because of the fact that we're using the new system. And I could manually fix this, or I could even go to, I believe it's under advanced format document, like that. And that fixes the document. Now it's fixed, right? And now the cursor's in the right spot. And if I were to type, public void testing, shift enter, like that, it would work properly and put the right spacing in for now my 2 spaces instead of 4 per tab. But I don't want to do that manually all the time, or even go down and find that shortcut. Well, we've got a better solution. This is the next one of my hints. This has been around for a while, but it's something that people often miss because it's so tiny and so hidden. So let's right down here near the bottom, right there. There's a little broom with a drop down. I want you to click the drop down, and you have Run Code Cleanup Profile 1 and Profile 2, or Configure Code Cleanup. Now, I'm on a demo.cs file, which has not been formatted. If I just run Code Cleanup Profile number 1, done. It has taken care of all that formatting. You think, cool, okay, you just ran that shortcut. It's a different way to run the shortcut. No, it's not. Let's go look at the Configure Code Cleanup and look at profile number 1. Format document. Yes, that was the tweak that we ran with the edit, advanced, and the rest. That's the menu shortcut. But then we also have remove unnecessary using statements. We also have sort usings. We also have apply file header preferences, okay? Which I don't think we have any file header preferences. But that didn't really solve any problems for us. We didn't have any extra using statements. But let's go over here to different demo and click the little Run Code Cleanup Profile 1. Check that out. Using statements are gone. It has cleaned up our code as well. We've done some really cool stuff. 4 steps in 1. But if we look at the Configure Code Cleanup, look at the available fixers. There's a list of fixers in this box. Sort imports, remove unnecessary imports, make private field read only when possible. So there's a lot of remove unused variables. There's a lot of stuff in here. I wouldn't add this one, by the way, but there's a lot of stuff in here you could do and just, select the ones that you think that are valuable and say, yep, put that in the include fixers. And now it's in profile number 1. We hit OK. And now whenever possible, it's going to make any fields private read only if that makes sense. So with your editor config, adding those features using code cleanup will help ensure some of those changes that you have may have made to things like spacing get applied right away and quickly, but also other things as well. Now, I did mention that I wouldn't remove unused variables. That's one of the options that's in here. Well, the reason why I would not do this one is because of the fact that your unused variables tend to indicate that you were starting to do something and then you lost track or got off track and forgot to finish it. And if you just remove those, you lose the indicator that maybe you've missed something. Okay, so I wouldn't do that one. Yes, it would be kind of good for your application, and not really, because the compiler is going to do it for you. But what it's going to do is it's going to hide the fact that you create a variable but never used it for some reason, which means you changed your mind or you forgot to finish that part of the code. So I wouldn't do that one. But as code cleanup, really cool stuff right there. All right, so that's number 6. Number 7, let's create some properties in here, okay? So I am going to create, let's create a property, prop, tab, string, first name, prop, string, last name, okay? So I have 2 properties. Now, what if I want to bring these values in a constructor? So the constructor, you pass in a first name and a last name, and I put those into the properties as initial values. Well, I could come down here and say CTOR for constructor. Then I could say string first name. I'll just do 1. And I could say first name equals first name, right? That's the kind of the default pattern you would do. But that's a lot of retyping the same things and getting the right order, and it's just a pain. So let's not do that. Instead, let's select our property, say control dot, and say generate constructor, different demo, string. And now we have a constructor, public different demo, which is the constructor. And it says string first name, notice the capitalization, and it says this property equals this value. Cool. Now last name, control dot, and say, let's add a parameter to different demo string or an optional parameter. and notice it shows you what the differences are. Let's add an actual parameter, and there we go. So now we have our constructor that takes in a first name and last name and assigns it to our properties. Pretty cool stuff, right? Now let's do the same thing over again. Let's move this down. If you don't know how to do that, by the way, if you select code like this, let's say I want to move this above first and last name, hold my Alt key after it's been selected, hold my Alt key, push the up arrow key, and move it where I think it's going to fit best. Fit best right there, we're good to go. Okay, so you can move it around wherever you want. So that is the one way to go about it. You create your properties and then say, hey, I want to create a constructor that brings in this value either as the actual value or as an optional parameter, depending on what you want. That's one way of going about it. But let's go to better demo. And in here, let's create a property. Actually, let's not create a property, let's create a constructor. Let's create a constructor, CTOR. We're gonna say string first name, string last name. Control dot, and we're gonna say, let's create and assign remaining as properties. Click it. And now we have two properties, first name and last name. So it's create our properties based upon the values you passed in. Now notice it only creates the gets for these, not the sets, because it is setting a value in the constructor. Therefore, we don't have to have a set if we don't want to. So it's saying, you know what, by default, I'm gonna make it as locked down as possible, and you can unlock it. And yes, I want to unlock it so that I'd put set here for these two. Okay, but now I have created these properties based upon the constructor parameters instead of creating the constructor parameters based upon the properties. Either way works. Also note that it has named things properly, meaning I use camel case for my parameters. That's what the standard in the industry. And then it says, okay, if we're gonna create properties, we're gonna take the same name, but make it Pascal case, which is the first letter of every word is capitalized instead of having the first full word lowercase. So it handles that conversion back and forth. So that's the shortcut number 7, which is adding properties to constructors and adding or creating properties based upon your constructor, kind of back and forth both ways. Now, let's keep going with this theme and look at number 8, which is we kind of want to test these values, right? Maybe this is coming from what a user creates or something like that. We want to make sure that we take in only valid data. We don't want to have, let's say, a null for our first name or something similar. But how would we create that? Well, what we do is we do a check. So we'd say, if we type the whole thing out. But you're probably catching on by now, we don't have to do that, because we can right click on our first name, go to quick actions refactoring, or just control dot when selecting it and say add string is null or white space check, or is null or empty, or a null check. Let's do, and we can add null checks for all parameters. Let's click that one. And it creates two different null checks. Is null or empty for first name, is null or empty for last name. Now, what you do with this depends on how your application is designed, but typically you'd throw an exception. And so Microsoft says, hey, you know what? We'll throw an exception. You can change it if you want to, but we're going to try and make it as good as possible. So argument exception, which is the right exception to throw, and we're going to use string interpolation and pass in the name of the parameter. So first name, that way if we change first name, it's going to change it here. So, and it puts it in single quotes, cannot be null or empty. And it's going to pass in the correct name of there. So we're going to have the right information, and including this exception has a thing that's going to look at which argument was the problem, and that is going to be where it pulls this first name in again. So that's why it pulls it in twice. Once for the message, and then once the exception knowing which argument was the problem. So really cool stuff. It does it automatically for us. Yes, you can modify it. Yes, you can change the logic, but with one quick action refactoring, I was able to do null checks on both of my parameters in just one step. So that is number 8, which is to test your parameters by just doing our quick actions and refactoring. Now, number 9, let's say that this first name, which is an auto property, has a get in the set. Let's say I want to convert that over to being a full property. Well, control dot, if you haven't followed along here yet, control dot for your quick actions refactoring. And in here we have the idea of convert to a full property. Click that, and it doesn't seem to do a whole lot. It just says, hey, get, and then an arrow with an underscore first name, and then set first name equals value with the arrow. And it does create for us at the very top, private string underscore first name, which follows our naming convention. And that's our private backing field for our new full property. You may say, yeah, but I want to do some work in this setter, and now I've got to put the curly braces in and all the rest. Just click the set, control dot, and say use block body for accessors. There you go. So now it keeps on the same line because they were on the same line before. Just hit enter. Now you've got your block body to make modifications to your set. Your get is still the one-liner because you don't need to have any more than that if you don't want to. Now, if you want something better, control dot, use block body. There you go. Now you can make your modifications to whatever you need to in your getter. Now, let's say you're in here and go, wait, no, that was the wrong one. I didn't want to do that. Or who created this full property with the private backing field and all the rest? I don't need that. Well, click on first name, control dot, use auto property instead. Boop, back to where it was, and notice that private backing field is gone. So you can go back and forth between full properties and auto properties without having to rewrite your code. So that is number 9 in our quick shortcuts. Okay. Now, number 10, I need to show you a new project type. Now, this works on any Razor Pages file, but we're going to add a Blazor project because it's the most useful in Blazor. So let's add a new project, and we're going to add a Blazor server app is fine. We're going to call this Blazor demo. .NET 5, no authentication, yes, HTTPS, no Docker. Let's just create it. By the way, there's a whole lot more going on with Docker. There's new stuff and really cool stuff around Docker and Docker Compose and being able to work with the containers and images and all the rest a whole lot easier in the newer versions of Visual Studio. I'm not going to touch on that today, but I just want to point that out. Okay, so I have already added this or changed my Visual Studio for this, but you will have to change it. It does require a restart of Visual Studio, which is why I already did it. You go to Tools, Options, go over to Environment, look for Preview Features, and in here, this option right here to enable experimental Razor Editor. Okay, there's a new Razor Editor they've been working on. I had it enabled for a while. I disabled it because it had some quirks. It was very experimental, and you may still find a few quirks. I haven't found the same quirks I was having, so they have fixed those. This is much more mature than it was, but note though, the keyword is still experimental. That does not mean you can't use it in production. You can absolutely use it in production. But if you have weird issues with Razor, come in here, uncheck this box, restart Visual Studio, see if that clears up the issues, okay? Just note that's the case. But it's not going to change any code in a negative way. It's not going to impact things that way. It's just that they're still working on how to set this Razor Editor up for all the things they want it to do, okay? So that's why it says experimental, but it's not going to hurt you to check the box. It just may mean you have to uncheck it again at some point, which I did before, but now I've rechecked it and have been using it. Okay, So this does require a restart of Visual Studio, which I did. All right. Now, if we go over to, let's go over to the index page. And in Blazor, we have some pages created for us. We have the error page, the fetch data page, the index page, and the counter page, right? Well, with this new system, we have a few things that are really cool. First of all, if I start typing, let's say edit form, but I'm not sure what exactly I want to do or what the options are, IntelliSense is showing up. But down here, let's see if we can zoom in. Down here, this little icon right here, it's got the @ symbol. It says only show tag helpers. So some of these things are just HTML stuff like div, right? But tag helpers are for C# stuff. So if I were to bring that back up, Control J, by the way, I bring it back up, I can click on that little @ symbol and it filters it down to just the things that are C# like that I might be interested in. For example, input checkbox, input date, input file. These are the things that you might have had to kind of memorize or know were there. Now you can look through IntelliSense and find them. Notice survey prompt. That's actually a custom one to this application, but it's found in the list. But then even further, if I hit edit form, I hit space, it's now going to again click that little button, the tag helper. It's going to say, hey, you want probably a model. And then there's some events here for on invalid submit, on submit, and on valid submit. And so you can know what the options are for any item you're adding using that filter to show you only the things that are C#-esque or C# related in your list. So that's one really cool thing. But then this is, I think, the number one improvement that the Razor engine needed. Okay. Now, just a quick note, Razor Pages and Razor Engine are two separate things. The Razor Pages uses the Razor Engine, but Blazor Pages uses the Razor Engine as well. That's why it's confusing. Yes, I get it. Razor Engine is all about mixing the C# with the HTML. That's what its job is, okay? So the Razor Engine had this flaw in that it didn't operate like the rest of our C# code. For instance, if I'm in Better Demo, and I go click on demo and I hit F12, I go to demo because F12 does a lookup for that item. Well, now if I'm in the Razor engine, I click on survey prompt and go, where is that? Hit F12, it takes me right there. And notice it even highlights it over here on the right. That's because I have Visual Studio set up to say, open the current document in the Solution Explorer list. So it takes me right to where survey prompt has been declared. So I know right where to go, but I just hit F12 and it takes me right where I need to be. And this works no matter where you are. So if I'm in main layout and I go, oh, where is that nav menu? F12, there's a nav menu and it pulls it right up. So this allows you to navigate through your Blazor project, especially with relative ease on the Razor page side, not just the C# side. This is a huge performance boost for those of us who are building web applications using the Razor syntax. Now, these improvements are still ongoing. That's why I said experimental, but it will do things like add missing using statements to your Blazor project pages and other things like that that you may have had to do manually in the past. So really cool stuff here. I think that was well worth the effort they put into it. They've definitely made a huge improvement in how we work with web projects. So that's number 10, which is the Razor autocomplete, the F12, finding the objects. That alone was worth it. But then also the basically bringing the IntelliSense and IntelliCode and all the rest to our C# in the HTML, the Razor syntax side of things. Okay, so that's number 10. We've got all 10 now. There's a lot more. I have other videos and other tips and tricks with Visual Studio. I tried not to step on those toes. I try to cover new things. So definitely go check those out because they'll still apply. There's still some really cool stuff in there that we didn't cover in this video. For example, the paste JSON as classes, that's some really cool stuff there, and so on. Those are covered in my other videos on Visual Studio tips and tricks. Are there others that have come out recently that you thought I may have missed or that we should add to a future list? I'm going to do this again because I keep adding more and more stuff here. So let me know down in the comments. Let me know if I missed something or if there's another one that you really like that you use all the time. Okay? Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.